Young, President of the Boulder County League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. We never support or oppose a political party or candidate. The purpose of this forum is to give you an opportunity to meet your legislators and inform you about proposed legislation. We thank Lisa Collins and Channel 22 for recording this forum, Boulder Valley School District for the use of the boardroom, Seal Ruffing, Second Vice President, who coordinated the event today, and our moderator, Jeanette Hillary, who is a member of the Boulder County League and active on the State League's Legislative Action Committee. I need to say a few things about the recording of today's forum. It can be viewed through the League of Women Voters of Boulder County website, lwvbc.org, as well as Channel 22 and other public access channels. Portions of the audience may appear on the recording, and by remaining in the room, you are consenting to be filmed. We ask that anyone who records this forum in any format, please respect the League's nonpartisan stance, follow the FCC rules to preserve the context or intent of what is being said, and air the recording in its entirety. So with formalities out of the way, we will turn our attention to that which you came to see. All the legislators who represent any part of Boulder County were invited, and we are delighted to have 7 here today. Thank you to our participants who took time away from your busy schedule to share information with us. Now I'll turn the forum over to our moderator, Jeanette Hillary.
Good morning, and I'm very pleased to again be moderating our Meet the Legislators. This is always an interesting and occasionally some challenging issues are addressed, and we've certainly had a very interesting session this year so far. We just got a last-minute notice, and Representative Diane Primavera from Broomfield, House District 33, is unable to be here today. She ended up having a conflict, but we do have 6 other very well-qualified representatives and senators to do this. If individuals from the audience have a question, there will be people passing out postcards, so please fill those out and hand them back to the ushers, and we will go through them. We plan to cover a myriad of issues that are in front of us. We are 87 days past into the legislative session out of 120. We have gone through the long bill. It's got, I think, one more little session to go through. We've addressed civil unions. We've addressed gun control. We have got an education finance bill that needs to be addressed and looked at and is on the floor. But without further ado, I'd like to start with Senator Heath and give you 2 minutes to do an overview of what you feel is the tenor of the legislature so far, and any bills or issues that you still feel you want to have backed or looked at. Good morning.
Good morning. As you said, this has been an incredibly busy session, and I think we've done a lot. You didn't mention the asset bill in there too, which
that's right, and I had it down in my notes. Sorry.
No, we're all just thrilled to have some of these things that have been hanging over us for a number of years, and which a number of us up here have fought long and hard for, and to have them come to fruition was an incredible accomplishment and something I know we're all proud of. So with that behind us, the gun control issues were obviously first and foremost. I still will regret, my friend over here on my left, Claire Levy, and I ran the concealed carry weapon bill on campus, which was to get concealed weapons off of our higher institutions of higher education. Claire was able to get it out of the House. I ran into trouble in the Senate and regret that. But we did do and did pass a number of other bills, gun bills, which took a lot of our time and attention. Thousands of emails every night, a lot of coming and going in the Capitol, and it took a lot of our attention, but I think was well worth doing, and had the privilege of being there when the president came out earlier this week and commented on what Colorado had done. So I feel really proud and privileged to have been a part of that as well. I'm also the Senate sponsor of the bill I know you want me to talk about later, the School Finance Act, the new one. We haven't done one since 1994, and I'll leave that one for later, if that's all right with you. We've got a number of economic development bills and teacher bills and higher ed bills that I'm part of that we'll also talk about. But for me, you can't talk about economic development and jobs without talking about education, and we're doing a number of things that combine those two, which we still have to do. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to Representative Claire Levy. She is, one of her committees is the joint, it's probably her prime committee, is the Joint Budget Committee. And 2 minutes to do your overview of how things are going, and then again, we'll go back to specific areas, including your gun control bill that lost. Yeah.
Great. Well, good morning, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to share what we've been doing this legislative session with the public and with those of you here in the room with us. As Jeanette said in her opening comments, we're 87 days into the session. Some of us sort of can see the end in sight now that the budget's passed, but we do have a lot of work still to do. We've passed some milestone legislation, and despite I think the volume of email and maybe some of the rancor that has been emphasized in the media, we've done a lot of work that has also been very bipartisan. I was very pleased that we got a third of the Republican caucus to support the budget yesterday when we took our final vote. It did not look like we would have any votes when we closed the budget out and presented it to the House. And because we worked with them and listened to some of their concerns, we were able to get those votes. I sponsored a number of criminal justice reform bills, and I've got several more still coming along that have passed unanimously or with large bipartisan majorities. And I'm very pleased that we're continuing to work together on sensible reforms to our criminal justice system. I will be talking in more detail about the budget later on this morning, and also about some of the other legislation that I'm working on that I have not yet gotten through the House, most notably a bill to allow monetary damages for civil rights violations. So I look forward to further dialogue this morning, and again, thank you for having us join you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to have Representative Dickie Lee Hullinghorst. She is the majority leader in the House and kind of helps control a lot of people, even though she's not the whip. And as maybe I'd like to have you give an overview of some of the issues that you see. And I know later on you're going to be discussing some of the new voting bill that's going to be coming out.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Hillary, and thank you all for being here. It's always a pleasure to see you all and to have an opportunity to visit about what's going on in the state legislature. My priorities as majority leader are really the priorities and agenda of our Democratic caucus and our House of Representatives. And we do that by listening to our constituents and representing them and reflecting our values as well as the values of the constituents. We heard very loud and clear in the election last year that people were still very concerned about jobs and the economy. We started off this year with a package of jobs and economic bills, and those are still moving through the process. Many of them needed appropriations, so we waited until the long bill, and now they'll be moving through the process, providing incentives for small business and development for advanced industries and others, things like that. Education was a big priority, and we'll hear more about that later on. We are looking forward to some good bills, to a good School Finance Act there. We were able to put more money in the budget for education. Environment and oil and gas were big issues in all of our areas, and we have an agenda that my colleagues will be talking about there. Along with doing, as they said, some pretty important unfinished business, asset, civil unions, gun safety, those things which we have already acted on and feel very proud that we were managed to accomplish quite a bit. So we still have some unfinished business to do. We need to deal with election law. I'll be talking about that later. We have to implement marijuana regulations, and hopefully we will be getting started on that very soon. So we still have a lot to do, and with almost a month left.
Thank you. Our next representative is Senator Matt Jones, and he has been sponsoring both oil and gas, but he's also jobs development and other issues. So how do you take this session so far?
It's been interesting, that's for sure. My name is Matt Jones. I represent Louisville, Lafayette, Longmont, and Boulder County side of Erie. The thing I focus on every year is how we get our state back on track. Jobs is the primary part of that, but also education and an environment. And on the job side, I introduced a bill this year called PACE. It's Property Assessed Clean Energy. And it's a way for commercial properties, small businesses, to get more capital to put in energy conservation or renewable energy improvements and save money, basically. But it's another financing source. It's optional. They don't have to do it. So that's another thing they can do. In Boulder County, it's called Climate Smart. Some people might be more familiar with that term. Secondly, working on education and funding, that's going to be a big issue for us. And we've made pretty dramatic cuts, 16% $1 billion over the last 4 years. We're starting to fill that hole, but we have a lot more big challenges that I think Senator Heath will probably talk about here in a few minutes. And third, on the environment, I've been doing a lot of work on oil and gas issues along with my colleagues in the Senate. I started a bill to increase inspectors and also to focus on problems that they should inspect more deeply. The situation at Longmont showed us that they weren't getting and finding problems such as this Ryder well, which had 100 times the state standard for benzene, which is a carcinogen in the groundwater, and it was never found by inspectors. So they need to do a more thorough job as well, and that's what the bill does. But those are the things I've been focusing on. It's been an extraordinarily busy session. This is my 9th session in 2 time periods, and I don't think so much has been done in my recollection in any 1 year. And so I'm just happy to be part of it, and I appreciate people giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Matt. Next is Representative Jonathan Singer, and he represents Longmont, and coming down into a little bit on the east side of Boulder. And I know you're very interested in child welfare and some other issues. What's your take on this session so far?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And I do represent Longmont, Niwot, Lyons, and I go right to the doorstep of Rocky Mountain National Park up in Allens Park, actually. So I get a good opportunity to see not only a wide geographic but demographic swath of Boulder County. My take on this session, it's interesting. I think the big difference between being in the minority as opposed to the majority, which the Democrats are now in the House, is that I don't think I've been busier. I don't think there was any time last year that I was busier than I was this year. From day 1 to day 120, I think that we have a real responsibility to not only come up with good ideas, but make sure that we can implement them fairly and effectively and efficiently. And that's the difference between being in the majority and being in the minority, is that you have that responsibility. I've worked on a wide swath of bills, sponsored everything from economic development to environmental issues to make sure that our oil and gas organizations are accountable to make sure that our air and water are kept safe. I've worked on election law, and for the last 3 or 4 weeks now, I've been on the Joint Select Committee for the implementation of Amendment 64, better known as the Pot Bill. But last but certainly not least, I've been focused on our child welfare system. The Denver Post recently came out with a series of articles about how our caseworkers are overloaded, our kids are not being taken care of the way that they should be, and unfortunately too many of them are dying when they don't have to. And so I've been working with our State Department of Human Services, our nonprofits, and our counties to make sure that we can create a fair and efficient system that actually responds or better responds to the needs of our kids across the state.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome Representative Mike Foote. He is the newest elected official in Boulder County, and he represents House District 12, and that's the Louisville-Lafayette area. And I know you've already jumped in both feet and have oil and gas legislation, but some other things. What's your take on the session so far?
Well, thank you, Jeanette, for having all of us, and thank you all for being here. You mentioned what is the case, which is that this is my first session, and I have to say I'm just extremely proud to be able to represent House District 12, which includes also some of Longmont, Lafayette, and Louisville. It seems like it's such a historic session, and you've heard other folks talk about all the things that we've been able to accomplish so far: civil unions, tuition equity, common sense gun safety. We have some good jobs bills that hopefully we'll be getting out of the House and Senate here pretty soon. Education reform, hopefully. And there's so many great things that we're doing. And I also should say that that the Boulder County delegation, the folks that you've already heard from, is just so extremely strong. And it's really a pleasure serving with them because as a first-time legislator, you get to see firsthand how good you are represented in all the parts of Boulder County. And it's been a great learning experience, and I can't think of any other people to learn more from than the Boulder County delegation. When I came into the session, I decided I wanted to focus on a couple of things. One was criminal justice, and the other was energy. And there's really two aspects of the energy part. One is renewable energy, energy efficiency type projects, and the other is oil and gas. And I know that we'll be speaking about the oil and gas part later. There's a lot to speak about there. With the criminal justice part, Representative Levy and myself co-sponsored the Crimes Against Pregnant Women Act, which got out of the House. It's now in the Senate. It's a way to be able to prosecute folks that cause tragedies such as a woman losing her pregnancy without implying anything to do with personhood. And I'm pretty proud of the language we came up with and a way that we were able to get that through the House, and I hope it'll get through the Senate. And of course, I'm happy to talk about that later. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the session. We have accomplished a lot. I think we have more to go, and thank you very much again for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Since a number of you have already touched on the education and in sort of including asset, which of course is something the League has been very interested in for years, I'd like to start with Senator Heath and talking about Senate Bill 213, which is the major school finance bill, but other education bills. And I'm going to give you 4 minutes to talk about it and some of its points, and then if anybody else has other comments to make about it. Those in the House obviously have not seen it yet. I'm sure you all know about it. But, any comments you might see, and then obviously the Joint Budget Committee people know about it. So it's 4 minutes.
Thank you,
Senator
thank you,
Heath.
Jeanette. And I can't talk about this. I see our friend and unbelievable superintendent sitting back there, Bruce Messenger, who's been a partner of mine throughout all of this and been my right hand in terms of giving me advice, as has Don Haddad, our superintendent of St. Vrain. And frankly, I couldn't have done this without either or both of them. So I appreciate that. And Bruce, if I misspeak here, you can answer or add anything you'd like at some point, I know. We have not looked at school finance and redone the School Finance Act, how we fund schools in this state, since 1994. So it's been a long time, and a lot's happened since then. We all probably have cell phones in our pockets or purse or whatever you have out there, and obviously none of that existed then. So things have changed a lot. And I think it's been a passion of mine to figure out how we can do better by our kids and do better funding, not only just K through 12, but higher ed as well. And I think many of you know I did run for governor in 2002, and that was the main emphasis then, and it's been the main emphasis certainly in now my 5th year in this session. And 2 years ago, I felt strongly enough about it that we ran a Proposition 103, because I felt, having one of the wealthiest states in the country, and funding education about the lowest in the country just did not make a lot of sense to me. If government doesn't do anything, I think it's first, and we could talk justice, we can talk other things, but I mean, if we don't educate our kids, then I think we have really failed to a large degree. And admittedly, money isn't everything, but when you're $2,500 per child, less than the national average, it says something. And if we were average, and I hate the thought, trying to be average, that's what you want all of your kids and grandparents to be, is average, right? Just to have our goal is to be average just drives me crazy. But at this point, we're so far below it. So we passed in the Senate, and the House, I think, takes it up next week. Is that right, Dickie Lee?
Yeah, well, no, I believe it's week after.
Week after. But anyway, we passed a new school finance, and it was 2 years in the making. And we spent a lot of time. Mike, Senator Johnston and I are the co-prime sponsors in the Senate, and it does a lot of things, not the least of which is basically it says, and this is where I'm going to need all of your help again, it says that the School Finance Act that we just passed does not take effect unless we pass a ballot initiative in 2013. And that ballot initiative is in the process of being written. And Senator Johnston and I, or none of us will do that. That's not part of the bill. But basically, it's designed to raise approximately $950 million, which is pretty much what Proposition 103. So it will add about $950 million. That is not anywhere near what we will need to get to average, just so you know. And it provides a base level of funding across the state of roughly $7,022 per child, which is considerably more than it is today, roughly about $500 more per child. It puts more money into special education. It changes a lot of the categoricals, and it does a lot of things that we now have a student count that you count kids on the 1st of October and you don't count them again. It allows a student count. It puts a lot more money in our rural school districts who now have a lot of them in 4-day school weeks. So it's doing a lot of things, and obviously I see I have 15 seconds. I'm not going to be able to get into all of it, but it's quite a comprehensive review of school finance, and one I think is worth fighting for, and I'm going to need your help. Thanks.
Thank you. Does somebody else want to respond, like how this might be approached in the House? Representative Hullinghorst, do you want to respond to that? Give you a minute? Or, and then maybe Representative Levy also, because you've seen it, assessing it through the Joint Budget Committee and doing the,
No.
no.
Well,
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, we'll do Representative Levy.
Okay,
yeah.
so we actually have not seen this bill in the Joint Budget Committee. We put money aside to fund the School Finance Act, which will govern the allocation of money in the 12-13 fiscal year, 13-14 budget year. So we have not seen the bill that Senator Heath and Senator Johnston are putting together. I just want to emphasize, though, that what Raleigh said about $950 million going into this new School Finance Act means that we really do need to get the voters behind this, and the voters need to understand that we continually ask our school districts to educate our kids, to prepare them for a work environment that we've never seen before, and we're asking them to do it with, right now, $1 billion less than they had to spend when we entered this recession. So it's a huge step forward, and one that we really need to take.
Okay. And did you want to respond, Representative Hollinghorst?
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that it was very clear that we really have two school finance acts that we're dealing with this year. The first one will go to this budget year, and it will involve regular school finance as we know it currently. And then the School Finance Act that Raleigh and Claire have spoken to, which will require additional money, additional taxes, and the citizens to deal with that in some kind of an initiative.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from any other? Yes, Senator Jones.
Yeah, just to add what Representative Hollinghorst just said, we're going to give voters a choice.
Yeah.
You can keep going as is with just enough money for additional pupils and just enough money for inflation. So in St. Vrain, your school class sizes are going to be 2 people bigger in high school and 1 person bigger above, I think it's 4th grade. Nothing will be done to fix that problem, the cuts that have been taking place in the last 4 years. Or you can vote for a revenue increase that would pay for more early childhood education, more work to close the achievement gap so people are more prepared to go out, and we invest long-term in what's going on in our state. And it's a big choice. And it's very similar to what you would do at a school district level as well. And I'm hoping people step up because it's the future of our state we're talking about. It's that simple.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Representative Foote.
Thank you. The only thing I wanted to add is that over the last election season, I knocked on over 10,000 doors, and I would knock on the door and typically start the conversation along the lines of, tell me what you're concerned about. And of course, jobs and the economy were just number one when you hear the national news, and I expected the same thing when I was knocking on doors here. Jobs and the economy came up, but the number one by far was education. Virtually everybody I spoke to would say that they were very concerned about education and the state of our funding now. So I know the concern is there, and I really hope that when we see this on the ballot, that people will be able to follow through and make their concerns good by making sure that we properly fund our schools.
Yeah, okay. And final, yes, Senator
Thanks.
Heath. Yeah.
Jeanette, just one thing I did want to add, and I should have started with this. You all have been very concerned with early childhood education
Yes.
as a league, and I have. And what this bill does is it puts full-day kindergarten in for every child in the state and preschool ECE for every at-risk 3- and 4-year-old. So it makes a huge step forward, leap forward in those two regards, which I should have led off with, because for me, that's critical.
Yeah, it's a big part. Yes, yes. Go ahead, Dickie Lee.
Thank you. And we can't talk about education, particularly in this community, without mentioning higher education as well. And I just wanted to say that we are working very hard to improve funding for higher education, and the budget includes additional money there, as well as I put together an amendment with the minority leader, Mark Waller, to the Joint Budget Committee bill, the long bill, that provides for merit scholarships that had been zeroed out before, and we have put some money back in for merit scholarships, and of course the budget had additional money for financial aid. So we're trying to do what we can as the revenues increase in the state for higher education.
Okay, that's good. I'd like to move on to the other, one of the other areas that a number of you have talked about, and that is the energy, renewable energy, plus the oil and gas. And I'll start with Senator Matt Jones to discuss some of his bills and some of the issues, and I'd then obviously go to Representative Foote to discuss his. I know there are a flurry of other oil and gas bills coming up. They're late bills that have come out, and there'll be hearings this coming week on some of them. So 4 minutes to talk about some of the oil and gas and energy.
So, thank you, and it's probably my favorite subject, actually, the renewable energy side of it, and it's been a team effort. That's the thing you got to know. We've been working together to try to make this happen, and on the renewable energy side, I'm doing the PACE bill, the Climate Smart bill, which gives more capital to local businesses to put in energy improvement and renewable energy improvements, and what that does is creates local construction jobs. It creates more money into the banking sector and banking, and so that there's jobs there as well. Also, I've been working on a couple bills that promote alternative fuel vehicles, primarily electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are cheaper to run through time if you take a 7-year time period, and they emit a lot less pollution as well. And so we're trying to push that. Onto the oil and gas issue, there'll be a lot more said by other members up on the panel here, but like I said, I did the inspection bill from the Senate side. I'm co-sponsoring some of the bills from the House side. And we've been coordinating among a number of legislators that have this issue where oil and gas activity, industrial activity is coming into their neighborhoods. That simple. You see it in Longmont, Erie. Lafayette's concerned. You go up into Fort Collins, they did a moratorium up there. The one in Longmont passed by 60% of the vote, more than any of us got. And it tells you it's a real bipartisan issue, and unfortunately it doesn't play out that way so much down at the State House. But in Arapahoe County, El Paso County, Colorado Springs was talking about doing things, and they're not a very active government in that way typically, and in Arapahoe County as well. So there are a bunch of us working on it. And the bottom line is because of the ability to drill directionally and hydraulic fracture, there are a lot more wells going into neighborhoods. And that conflict, that industrial activity, which we typically zone, has a lot of challenges because the local governments have been hamstrung in some ways, not as many ways as the oil and gas industry will tell you, to regulate that activity. So we've been working on both sides of that, wanting to strengthen the local government side of it and also the state regulatory side of it. The recent rulemaking the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission did came woefully short. When it came to setbacks, they went from 350 to 500 with 4 exceptions, where the exceptions will swallow the rule in many cases. And when it came to groundwater sampling, they did or water sampling nearby these wells. They did a pretty good job in the state level, but in the area we're in, the Wattenberg area, they exempted us out, and we have 1 monitoring sample taken per quarter section, per quarter mile. So it's really hard to find out if something's polluting the groundwater using that kind of approach. So long and the short of it is we need to make a big change this way. We need to make sure oil companies are responsible and accountable, and that's our objective. And we did a team effort trying to get more inspectors, and I'll let some other folks talk more about that. But the fact is that we have problems up in Longmont at a number of wells where they're far in excess of state standards, 100 times in one well for benzene, 300 times in another well. And then you read about Parachute on the Western Slope, and they had the same thing. And so we're going to keep pushing this and trying to get responsible, accountable drilling practices and fracking practices.
Okay. Thank you. And now, Representative Foote, you've had a couple of bills on oil and gas, and I know your name is on a couple of the other bills that are coming up. Why don't you talk about some of your bills and some of the issues that you've seen in working with some of the other legislators?
Sure, thank you. What I'll do just very quickly is highlight the energy efficiency bill that I had the pleasure of working on that also made it through the House, House Bill 1105, co-prime sponsor with Representative Max Tyler out of Lakewood, who really I think is acknowledged as being the House expert on these issues. And really what it does is it provides mortgage incentives for energy efficiency in houses. That's the long and short of it. And if the higher the energy efficiency on a house that you have, the more mortgage incentive that you have. And so it promotes energy efficiency, and it of course is a job creator as well. And so it has those dual benefits among others. But going back to oil and gas, which now I see I only have 30 seconds, so
No, I'm going to give him a couple of more minutes.
Oh, good.
He has a lot of time now. He's a sponsor. Yeah, 2
Well,
minutes, please.
Thank you.
Yes,
So
I'm sorry.
I'll talk a little bit about oil and gas, and Senator Jones has it right. It's been a very much a team effort, and not just Boulder County folks, by the way. There are people from Adams County, Larimer County, Arapahoe County, all over the state. People are hearing from their constituents that there's a big concern here, and the system that we have is just not working adequately to address those concerns. And so it's a pretty wide coalition that we have in the House in particular in order to address these issues, and also in the Senate. The first bill that I introduced is House Bill 1267. That deals with fines on oil and gas operators that commit violations of the current regulations. You may not know this, but the current fine schedule that we have in place was put in place in 1955. And it hasn't been increased since then, which what it calls for is $1,000 per violation per day maximum, with a maximum of $10,000 total. And we saw this play out at the Ryder well up in Longmont, for example, where the company that was supposed to be cleaning up the mess that was created at the Ryder well didn't do it for 2 years, and they were fined $10,000 for that, which really is kind of like a $1 parking ticket for you and me, even if that. It just doesn't deter operators that are not as inclined to follow the rules. And I think it really rewards bad operators as opposed to some of the good ones that are out there that try their best to follow the rules. The other one is House Bill 1269, which addresses conflicts of interest that we see within the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. And there's really two main areas on this one. First, they have a mission that I think is contradictory. Their mission is to not only regulate the industry, but also to promote the industry, just to put it in kind of short terms. And that seems to be a real contradiction in terms. And then the other part of it is that there are commissioners on the COGCC that are being paid by the industry at the same time that they're supposed to be regulating and promoting the industry. And again, I think that's a conflict. And I go back to the public confidence aspect of this as well. I think if you speak with people, many people at the doorstep and otherwise, they're very concerned about the COGCC and some of these conflicts. And really, that's what we have to protect our public health, safety, and welfare is the COGCC. That's the state agency. Oil and gas industry has managed to exempt itself from some federal regulations, and the state agency has also expanded its preemption and not allowed the local jurisdictions to address some of their citizens' concerns. So that's what we have as a COGCC, and I think that we need to increase public confidence in that. And then the final aspect is the inspectors issue. The Joint Budget Committee and Representative Levy did an excellent job in their budget, and they did allocate money for some more inspectors. Representative Singer and myself ran an amendment successfully in the House to increase those number of inspectors as well. Our goal is to try to get it so that each well would be inspected an average of once every 2 years. That's still not good enough, in our opinion, but we're so far behind that we figured that was the best way that we could go. North Dakota does it much better, and other states do it much better. And the bills are, to say the least, controversial, particularly the conflicts of interest. I'm going to steal one of Representative Singer's lines. I'm going to give him full credit, though, for the line before I say it. House Bill 1269 has been very actively lobbied against. Right now, you may not know this, but we have 16 inspectors statewide for 52,000 wells. There's more lobbyists down at the Capitol lobbying against my House Bill 1269 than we have inspectors statewide. So that's the situation that we have right now with oil and gas in this state, so we're hoping to change that.
Okay, thank you. I know I saw Representative Singer wanted to add something to this discussion,
Yeah,
which is a hot topic.
It is a hot topic, and that quote that Representative Foote just gave you has now been known by the lobby corps as another Singer zinger.
We like humor.
But so if we can't laugh, then we can't survive here. There's just one other point. I won't belabor anything that I know I'm co-sponsoring legislation with Senator Jones as well as Representative Foote. A lot of you probably drive hybrid vehicles, though, and I'm working on a bill right now with Representative Duran in the House and Senator Johnston and Ulibarri in the Senate to actually make sure that not only our hybrid cars but our electric plug-in cars get the same or similar tax credits. Right now it's pretty confusing, and we actually have small businesses working with the auto industry, working with car dealers, working with environmentalists to actually make a uniform system to make sure that not only our hybrids but our plug-in vehicles get those same credits, so we can increase American jobs, focus on getting a better economy and cleaner air at the same time. So be looking for that.
Okay, thank you. We've got a lot of other topics to get into. Or is there some other comment on the oil and gas bills? Otherwise, I'd like to move on to another topic. One that both Representative Levy and Representative Foote have mentioned is the criminal justice and juvenile justice. And it's, again, an area that I know on our state level, the league is very interested and concerned about. And 4 minutes to talk about some of the issues and give you also some time to talk about your concerns and issues. Claire.
Thank you. Let's see, 4 minutes. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I think I've listed the bills that I'm sponsoring, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we've done just from the budget perspective on this.
You've got too many bills. I've got a whole
And-
page full.
Yeah, I've got a lot of bills. And I'm not going to talk about the death penalty bill in the context of criminal justice, because that really sits by itself as kind of a moral issue and an issue about how we as a society address issues of crime and punishment. But I'm working to get through the House a bill, it's a resolution that would create a task force, an interim committee, to work over the summer on access to justice for juveniles who are in the system. More than half of them actually waive counsel at their first appearance, and often they do that under pressure from their parents, who just want them to take their punishment and go and move on. They do it because they don't know what their rights are. And the Criminal Justice Defense Coalition did a comprehensive study on the state of juvenile defense in Colorado with some assistance from federal partners, national partners. And, we're not doing a real good job of representing kids. And what we know, because I work a lot on the adult side of things, is that these things stay with you. You may think that what happens as a juvenile, it remains confidential, but it does stay with you for a long time, and it's very important that kids get defense early in the process. So that effort is actually very much at the beginning stages. I referred to a bill that I just passed unanimously out of the House, and that's a bill to create pretrial diversion programs throughout the state. And this will allow district attorneys to, instead of actually filing charges on an offender, to put them into the equivalent of probation before those charges are filed for a 2-year period. And if they're successful, then the charges are dismissed and they have no criminal record whatsoever. And again, this is part of an effort to be sure that people don't get things on their record that stays with them, that affects their ability to take out student loans or affects their ability to get a job. I worked with Republicans to address some of their concerns about sex offenders being allowed to go into this program, and I was very pleased that passed on a bipartisan basis. I will also be working, again, I think this is my third year, to work with Senator Stedman on a bill to address these collateral consequences that people experience. You go, there's the actual criminal sentence component of whatever crime you commit, and many people are unaware of all the civil penalties that may follow them throughout their lives, being ineligible for certain professional licenses, being ineligible for public housing, a wide variety of disabilities that interfere with a person's ability to reintegrate, become productive, self-supporting members of society. So that's just a few of the bills. We've got a major reform of our drug sentencing laws that will come through the Senate, and I'll be sponsoring in the House. I've got now over into the Senate a bill that addresses pretrial detention, and we can talk more about the rest of them later. I see my time's up.
Unless Representative Foote may pick up some of them on his concerns and on the criminal justice. And, you have 3 minutes to talk about some of the issues and pick up anything that Claire might have missed or.
Sure, thank you. First of all, I want to mention and congratulate Representative Levy for putting forth some very excellent legislation when it comes to the criminal justice system. She mentioned that it had strong bipartisan support, much of it. I've supported it. And my background as a prosecutor, I've done it for 10 years prior to being elected. And if you want to talk about bipartisan between Republicans and Democrats, that's one thing. But bipartisan between prosecutors and defense attorneys, that's a whole different story, but that's what we have here. And so it is very good legislation. What I mentioned during the introduction was one of the bills, the Crimes Against Pregnant Women Act, that I'll expand upon just very quickly. You all may remember it's been over a year at this point, in Longmont, there was a woman that was driving back from her last well baby check prior to giving birth. She was hit by a drunk driver, middle of the day, and she lost her pregnancy as a result. And that's just simply tragic. What compounds that, though, is that under current law, that act could not be prosecuted because there's no specific provision in the criminal law that would hold the offender accountable for causing that loss of pregnancy. All that someone like that could be prosecuted for would be a DUI, traffic offenses, and so forth. So that's been a real issue that's been identified for a long time. And have been several efforts in the legislature to try to address that, because I think most people recognize that that's not achieving justice, that offender can't be held accountable for that act. The problem has been, of course, as I'm sure you can predict, it gets caught up in the politics and the debate about abortion. And it's hard to bring both of those sides together. What we have managed to do this year and what passed the House is create a bill that does allow for prosecutors to hold those offenders accountable if they're able to prove it in a way that completely skips the abortion debate by saying straight in the bill, this has nothing to do with personhood. Nothing in this section can invoke personhood, and making it very clear that there's nothing in this law that can lead us down this road. And it's language that was absolutely necessary, and it's language that we were able to get Planned Parenthood support, for example, NARAL support, for example, and a lot of folks that really do care in the choice community about these issues. So we were able to get that support because of that language and other language. And we were able to pass it through the House, and there was bipartisan support for that as well.
Yeah.
And it's a good solution. I think that these offenses need to be prosecuted, and assuming it gets past the Senate and signed by the governor, we'll be able to do it.
Thank you. Why don't we go back to Representative Levy and have her just finish up on a few of the other bills? Because seriously, every legislator is allowed 5 bills. Claire has an outstanding record in doing very thoughtful legislation, pieces of legislation. So she has a myriad of bills, and I'd like her to be able to address some of them because it shows a lot of the leadership that she has and respect in the House on it. So how about a couple more minutes to talk about that?
Thank you. I appreciate that. One of the reasons I have so many bills actually is because I'm on the Joint Budget Committee, and we just decide we need to sponsor more bills, and we do it. But some of these bills, I cannot take credit for actually crafting them. They have been initiated by the Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice, which I sit on. And I really just become the vehicle for the good work that the CCJJ is doing, and we are reauthorizing the CCJJ for another 7 years because it has been a really effective forum for bringing together prosecutors and defense attorneys and probation officers and judges and sheriffs and police chiefs and victim advocates and whatnot. So that's where a lot of this comes from. I don't want to take too much credit for it. I do want to address, though, issues that we don't necessarily carry bills on. Some of this is just a funding issue. And the privilege I have sitting on the Joint Budget Committee is being able to get under the hood at the Department of Corrections, for example, and looking at the treatment they provide to sex offenders as a condition of being released, or the reentry programs that they have to prepare offenders who've been incarcerated to be released. There's been a lot of news about Mr. Ebel, who allegedly and probably did murder Tom Clements, the director of the Department of Corrections. And the shocking thing is that he spent 7 or 8 years in solitary confinement and then was released directly to the streets. Senator Carroll and I, several years ago, sponsored a bill to get the Department of Corrections to stop that practice, realizing that you cannot take somebody who's been held in a 4 by 8 foot cell for 8 years and then set them free. We still need to work on this, not just that narrow issue of coming out of solitary confinement, but the whole issue of what do we do with offenders who have finished their sentences, who are going to be released, and who may not really be ready for that next step.
Okay. I'd like to move on to some of Representative Singer's issues in child welfare and some of the bills and things, and 4 minutes to talk about some of the things that you're seeing in the session and going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for those of you who don't know it, I actually have a background in child welfare. I spent several years working with the Boulder County Department of Human Services, focused primarily on little kids, infants all the way up to about age 12, but also doing juvenile delinquency, allegations of abuse and neglect, and actually all the way up to elder abuse. But having that on-the-ground experience really has been instructive about how I wanted to conduct myself as a legislator. Not only in terms of the issues that I wanted to approach, but how I wanted to approach those issues. And, I think actually I have to thank the Denver Post and the media for really shining a light on a system that hasn't gotten the attention that it needs and it deserves. Just last year, we had 11,000 substantiated allegations of abuse and neglect of kids in our state. 11,000. Abuse and neglect substantiated. The Kemp Center, which is here in Colorado, it's a nonprofit that works with Children's Hospital. Their goal is to cut that number in half. And while that sounds like a kind of pie-in-the-sky dream, if you look back to the early 1990s and the rash of incidents of domestic violence and the fact that the community and the media got behind an issue that had been ignored for too long, we've actually seen almost a 60% decrease in the incidents of domestic violence since the 1990s. So this is a winnable goal. And that being said, even one incident is too many, but we need to start somewhere. So there are two particularly big bills that are going to be coming up this year. The first one is a screening bill. The question is, most people, when they pick up the phone and they're concerned about a kid, and maybe it's not a broken bone or a serious injury, but maybe it's a kid that's looking a little on the skinny side, looking like they're maybe not getting the food that they need at home. Most people don't know who to call right now. So what we're looking at is creating a statewide hotline system. And we have worked with all 64 counties to make sure that we're not stepping on their toes, to make sure that the state isn't taking away something that allows for really good individual response that are tuned to individual community needs, but at the same time make sure that there's some consistency and that there's more consistency and more training for our screeners who are on the other side of the phone and know the right questions to ask. You can't diagnose the right illness unless you ask the right questions if you're a doctor or a nurse. It's the same issue here. You need to know the right questions to ask. And while I think our county does a great job, and most of our counties do a great job, that consistency is going to help. The last issue, and this is a lot more serious actually, is regarding child fatalities and how we deal with child fatalities. Over the last few years, we have seen a rash of child fatalities that occur in homes where child welfare has been involved at some point. And so we need to, once again, continue to work to make sure that we are able to consistently not only screen those calls when they first come in, but respond to them in the right way, and make sure that families have the tools that they need to keep kids safe, rather than coming in with a shoot first, ask questions later approach from our state. really taking a look at what we can do to strengthen families. So you'll be seeing a child fatality review bill as well to make sure that we're incorporating the best practices, both at the front end and, like I said, making sure that we stop these incidents of not only abuse but fatalities among our most vulnerable kids.
Okay, any other comments from other panel representatives? Okay. I'm going to take a quick, brief break to ask a question from one of our committees on civil discourse in here. Are you influenced by any of the protests? You had mentioned a lot of things going on during the gun control and that kind of thing. What influences you? Do those protests influence you one way or the other? And what is the best way for people to, how do you listen to your constituents? What's the best way? 1 minute, each of you, starting with Senator Heath.
You know, I was actually asked this at the town hall, and frankly, one of the best ways to communicate with me is coming to the town halls, which I will be doing one on April 20th at the
Yeah, a
Boulder
lot of you
Chamber,
do them,
just as
yeah.
an outside. But yeah, we listen, and we get, thousands of emails, and these redundant emails, after you've read, a couple of them, then it kind of glosses over, and you know that it's just somebody out there ginning up things. It was particularly in the gun safety issues. I mean, we just got inundated with emails from all over the country, but there's nothing like having constituents like you all reach out to us. Two of the bills that I am running, Senate bills, came from constituents like you all just picking the phone up and calling me and saying, here's an issue that I have. In fact, Representative Singer and I, one of the first bills that the governor signed this year was a bill that we did together. So, that's always the best is to, have that one-on-one contact. Yes, I mean, we pay attention, but there's some kind of something going on in front of the Capitol every day. So
It's true.
the gun control bills, we
West
had
steps get worn.
cars circling for 9 hours blowing their horns. That frankly did not do anything positive in terms of what helping me in making my decision. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Representative Levy.
Thank you. This is kind of a, do they influence you? Well, yes or no. If the protesters or if the rally on the west steps of the Capitol is in support of one of my issues, well, then I point to that to say, look at the public support for what I'm doing. If it's a gun control issue, if it's something that is not supporting one of my efforts, well, then I say, well, that's just a narrow fringe of activists, and they're not even voters in Colorado. So, you kind of, you take it both ways. I do think one thing that happens when you have these very, very vocal groups is it is hard for us who are down there every day to separate out, well, how much does this actually reflect broad sentiment and how much is this just ginned up by narrow interest groups that turn out people that don't have anything better to do. And it's actually very hard to figure that out. It's also very difficult. All of us have mentioned the inundation in our inboxes. It's easy for somebody to sit at home and push the send button. It's hard for us to get a sense of how broad or how deep support or opposition is when we've made communication so easy.
Okay. Representative Hollinghorst.
Thank you. Well, I agree with both Raleigh and Claire. I think they said it very well. The only thing I would add is that, or emphasize at least, is that I get the strongest input and the input that affects me the most from my constituents directly. And I desire to hear from them, and I will change my mind from time to time on an issue that's really important in my constituency. So I think that if you really want to have an impact on state legislators, the very best way to do it is personally and directly with a good reason for why you are interested or you support or you oppose a particular issue. That's the very best way to do it. We listen to everything, but we really hear that input.
Okay. Senator Jones.
I think those are all great answers. I agree with Senator Heath about the town halls. That's a great place we're going to be anyway. You can catch us before or after on an issue unrelated. We're doing one on the 18th on education up in Longmont. The Longmont legislators are. And I agree with Representative Hollinghorst. A constituent coming to you with an issue is like the bottom line. That's how you do it. In a conversation, and even more importantly, if you get to know somebody a little bit, it's hard to do that a lot because we have so many issues and so many people. I mean, I represent 143,000 people. As far as the protests, to me, I hear some noise outside. I go, "Who's that?" And they say, "It's so-and-so," and I go, "Oh, okay," and then back. They don't, to be honest, have a whole lot of influence. It's, what you're trying to do is pass good substantive legislation in a collaborative way. And if you feed into that positively, that's the way to get it done.
Representative Singer.
I think showing up to events like this is a great way to get involved. I think the protests out there are really, you have to ask what your purpose is. And I think the purpose of having a large rally is to get into the media, which is a good thing, to then hopefully influence your legislator. But if I have a choice between walking by someone holding a sign saying stop this or start that, and a constituent who comes down to the Capitol and asks me about a particular bill, or vice versa, when I'm knocking on a door and they ask me about a particular bill or a particular issue that's important to them, that makes a huge difference. During the gun debate, one of the things I actually did is I actually went out with a constituent who is a shooting instructor. We went to the shooting range. I saw what an assault rifle was. I saw what they did and how they're used. And I may have a slightly different tack on the gun issue than I did before. One of the other things is I would just make sure that people stay away from the 4-letter worded emails. They are open record, so anyone can see those, first of all. But, I did respond back to someone who was a constituent, and I said, I'm not sure how calling me an idiot is going to change my mind. And he said, well, he wrote back and he said, "Oh, actually, you're right. I was really upset about this, but, if you really want to talk about it, you can do it later." And people, they can always call me. Go to my Facebook page. My cell phone number's on there.
Okay. Representative Foote.
I have to agree with everything that's been said. I'll go back to the gun safety debate as well, because I think that's where we saw a lot of contentious debate. And I ended up voting for all of the bills that we saw in the House. We're going to see a couple here shortly as well. But the 4 that started in the House and went through the Senate, or 3 of them did. But my thought process was different on all of them. I didn't just say, "Hey, it sounds good." I came to that conclusion quicker on some than others. And what I found was not effective at all was when people entitled their email, "Representative, you're violating your oath of office to the Constitution." And that just gets it off to a bad start, I think. Obviously, I disagree. And then also just there were many that came in that opposed everything. And I don't think that, well, there are people that were opposing everything, but most people went through different thought processes on the different bills. They were very different bills. And there were some that had maybe a lack of thoughtfulness that I would just not pay attention to. The thoughtful ones, I would pay attention to, because that's important. But the other ones that are just automatically generated that say, oppose everything just because I said so, and by the way, you're not upholding your oath of office, those just went into the trash.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Just to add
Yes.
one other thing, just a word of advice, at least as it works for me. If you're sending me an email and you put Boulder on there, I guarantee you it'll get a lot different than if it doesn't have anything and I don't know you, and it probably comes from Indianapolis or gosh only knows where. So it would always be nice for our constituents, at least mine, to identify themselves as a Boulder person. And it gets read very, very differently than the ones that are just blank.
Okay, thank you. Now, getting back to some of the bills coming up, Representative Hollinghorst, you want to cover some of the new election law that is being proposed, and it's a monster bill. It hasn't been introduced yet, so how about you want 4 or 5 minutes on that?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, yes, this is an issue that we heard loud and clear prior to the election and during the election and after the election that needed some attention at the state level, and certainly there are stories all over the country about elections being far too politicized and giving too much shall we say, flexibility to elected officials to make decisions on a political basis as to how you run elections. And while I don't believe we had huge problems in the state of Colorado, we did have some issues in the state of Colorado. Active, inactive voters is one, for instance, that clearly needs some assistance. We also have a very involved, very confused election law from lots of changes over the years, and the whole process of voting in the state of Colorado can be confusing, particularly in the Denver metropolitan area where you may have counties, one county doing one thing, another county doing another thing, and it not being consistent across the board. So we began to try to tackle this issue actually before the session started, and have been working throughout the session with some of our colleagues in the House and the Senate, and with stakeholders and others gaining as much cooperation who wish to work on a bill like this. And we have finally got a draft out. And I know the League of Women Voters was very much on the list to get that draft, and I understand you're starting to
Yes.
work on it. And
We spent a long time yesterday discussing it.
good. And we very much look forward to that input. I will be co-prime sponsor in the House with Representative Dan Pabon from Denver, and Senator Angela Giron will be the sponsor in the Senate from Pueblo. We will start it in the House, and it will be introduced, I believe, the first part of this week. We're anxious to get input, and then after it's introduced, we will want input from as many people as possible, and hope to have it in committee in about 2 weeks. It will be in the State Affairs Committee of the House, and then move forward in the process. But obviously, we don't have a lot of time to work on it, and although it is a very large bill, maybe I'm just afraid to look at the number at the last page of the draft, but I think it's somewhere around 120 to 130 pages.
It's something like that, because they did a lot of flipping through the whole. Yeah, so we've got it.
But, a lot of that is changing a lot of different areas of statute based on the principles and the things that we want to accomplish. And I will try to, give you a sort of a rundown as in the amount of time that I have. But I will say that it deals with the active-inactive issue. It simply does away with the category of inactive voter. If you are a registered voter, you will be treated the same regardless of when and how you voted. It will provide for same-day voter registration for elections. It will do that in a way that allows the county clerks to do that efficiently. But if you are not registered, you can go to a voting or polling location on Election Day using our new electronic system that is in real time and is 21st century technology to determine if you voted or not, and you can do that throughout the state of Colorado. Then we will also provide full option voting for every registered voter, including having each registered voter receive a mail ballot prior to the election. They have the option to vote the mail ballot if they want, or to go to a service polling center on Election Day or in early voting and vote there instead. So it really is full option voting. You will be able to register online up to 8 days before the election. The residency requirement will be 22 days, and 22 days before the election, official registration will close, but it will begin again at the full early voting centers and the full service centers on Election Day. So that gives you an idea. We are trying to standardize all of those processes across the state, so you get information on Channel 4 about what's happening in Denver will apply to you in Boulder County as well. So I'm very excited about this. We've done a lot of work. We have had full involvement of the county clerks in making this implementable, reducing their costs, and allowing them to move forward to implement this in the best way possible. I think it will be, if we get it passed and we get all of your input, it will be a model for elections across the country, and I'm very excited about being able to carry it on your behalf and the behalf of the people that are concerned about this issue.
Okay, I don't know, none of you, of course, know the rest of the bill unless some of you have been privy to it, but other election bills, I know Representative Singer has introduced a bill and that got passed on.
You sound so surprised.
No, well, it was introduced last year and it met an abysmal failure. But anyway, being able to register at 16.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to go into that briefly. So right now, if you're 16 years old, people always talk about your ticket to freedom is your car. I think the real ticket to freedom is being able to vote. If you're already at the DMV, we've had a very successful motor voter program where if you go to update your driver's license, you can also simultaneously register to vote. 13 other states have actually put in a plan where, and hopefully we will get the governor's signature on this very soon, to actually allow 16-year-olds, when they get their driver's license, to pre-register to vote. What this would do is automatically update their voter registration and make them an active voter when they turn 18. So they can't vote when you're 16, can't vote when you're 17, but by the time you turn 18, you don't need to go back to the county clerk's office or to the DMV to update your voter registration. You automatically can. This is great for educators, actually. Educators love this because in your high school civics classes now, your educators can say, you can actually start to take part in your democracy now. So this is one of the bills I brought forward. I also brought forward another bill that actually did die this year on approval voting, which would have changed how we do things in nonpartisan elections if nonpartisan voting districts wanted to do things. But I'll bring that up another time. That was unfortunately a bipartisan bill that we'll have to take another crack at. But I guess second or third time's the charm with voter pre-registration. And like I said, we look forward to seeing the governor's signature on that. But it's a real exciting opportunity. We had so many 16 and 17-year-olds come and actually
Yes.
testify at committee.
They were outstanding.
And the league did an excellent job. New Era, Colorado did an excellent job. But that was really the most inspiring part of this, is seeing 16 and 17-year-olds with the Colorado Youth Advisory Council actually come up and talk about how this bill was going to affect them. We always talk about juvenile justice and how we're going to punish kids, but this is actually a good thing that they had their own voice in.
Okay, I know you want to make a comment.
Just a
Senator
quick
Heath.
comment,
Yes.
Jeanette. Yes, thanks. And I chaired State Affairs in the Senate for the last 3 years, and I can't tell you the countless bills, election bills that came before us. And Representative Hollinghorst-Dickey, I can't tell you how thrilled I am. And first time I've heard your total summary of it, but all of this is so needy, and we're really going to need your help with this one. This is critical, I think, for us to get done, and I can't thank you enough for taking the lead on this.
We have a public finance committee here in Boulder County, and we have a question that we're going to try to get through really quickly, because most of this is yes or no answers, even if you have a lot of opinions on it. Because I need to do your wrap-up, too. We're sort of pumpkins. Do you favor publicly financed campaigns for state legislators and/or statewide offices in Colorado? Why or why not? And I know it's in 25 words or less kind of thing, but let's start with Representative Foote, a minute, whether or not you do support publicly financed and why or why not, and if you would support also supporting a bill. Anyway.
Well, thanks. In a minute or less,
Yes, a minute or less.
I'm supportive of the concept. I think the devil's in the details, of course, like anything. I can tell you that the way that we finance campaigns right now is problematic. A typical state house race now in a swing district, the candidate has to raise in a state house race between $150,000 and $200,000, him or herself. Of course, the opponent raises the same amount of money, and then you have the soft side that comes in. You have $1 million races in Jefferson County for a state house race. And all indicators are that's just going to continue to go up. So you have a candidate that instead of spending time on policy or knocking on doors or going to town halls, spends time raising money out of necessity to be competitive. And I think that that's very unfortunate. I hope that we can come to some kind of conclusion that may include publicly financed campaigns. Happy to listen to those ideas. All I know is that our current system doesn't seem to be working very well, in my opinion.
Okay, Representative Singer.
Short answer is yes. And why? I think we heard a little bit of it. You know, the thing that we need to be really cognizant of is we can't just look at the campaign itself. You need to look at those outside organizations, especially with the Citizens United finding. If you inhibit how candidates can interact, which is actually, I think, a good thing. I think when you have to, I raised, over $60,000 for a job that pays $30,000, and they expect us to be fiscally responsible. I mean, there's a disconnect there. So I think the thing that we need to do is really do something comprehensive that not only looks at how candidates need to be raising money and should be raising money, but also affects these outside organizations which can spend unlimited gobs of money and can swing races without any input from candidates.
Okay. Senator Jones.
In concept, I support it, but I think we need to recognize the fundamental problem here, and it's a series of court cases at the federal level that open the floodgates. They equate speech with money, and until you fix that, all these other things are just going to kind of be sideshows on this thing, unfortunately. I put together a resolution with Senator Morgan Carroll last session that reversed, it's called Reverse Citizens United, which is the most egregious of the cases, but it's not the only one. And this has been going on for a while, in some FCC rulings, not FCC, FEC rulings as well. And that's, we need to fix this at the federal level to make public funding viable.
Representative Hollinghorst.
Thank you, and I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. I also support public financing in concept, but we really can't do that until we solve these other problems. And we need to hold corporations and the very rich accountable in some way for the amount of money that they put into campaigns. That's got to be a top priority as we address this issue comprehensively.
Okay. Representative Levy.
Well, thank you, and I mean, I agree with everything that's been said as well. Public financing, is a great idea, but that was a great idea 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and we have a completely different campaign finance landscape now. And with the rise of independent expenditure groups that are unaccountable, that even candidates cannot hold accountable if they're interfering in their race. I think while public finance is a good thing, I really think our focus has to be elsewhere. And it has to be on limiting the role of corporate money, on disclosure of who's behind some of these ads with the patriotic-sounding names, and making sure that if corporations are people, and if they do have free speech rights that are equivalent to those of a natural person, that those corporations are accountable to their shareholders for the positions they're taking.
Okay, Senator Heath.
This is one I think we all obviously agree on the public side of this. Between Josie and myself, we've run 3 statewide races, and I can tell you it is just an abomination what you have to do. And the time, if you're not spending 7-8 hours a day at that level, trying to raise money, both not only in a state but on a national level, and making trips to Washington and doing all the other things you have to do. I mean, there is no way for an average person to be able to even contemplate running, and I think that's the biggest concern, that we've made it so hard for someone who really cares about running for public office to do it. So I would hope we can get this settled, but like all of you, if we don't get this settled federally, it doesn't matter really what we do here.
Thank you. We have time for a quick update and summation of where we're going to go forward till the end of the session, which ends on May 9th, I believe it is, or somewhere around that time. And so I'm going to start with Representative Foote, a minute and a half. What other bills you see you might be challenged with, and anything else you want to close with?
Sure, thank you. Thank you again for having us here. This has been really a good opportunity, and hope that we get a chance to speak with anyone that has any further questions at the end of this. We've touched on some of the bills that are still outstanding, the marijuana implementation, school finance, elections. These are really big deals that we still have to get through, and I hope that we do. Me personally, I know that I'll be continuing to work on oil and gas bills, and those are really the last things on my docket at this point, other than considering the other bills that others are bringing. One thing that I guess I want to leave you with is an extension on the question that was asked before about what's most effective for legislators and having your voice heard. And I would, for those of you that haven't been down at the Capitol, I would really highly encourage you to do that. I appreciate it when constituents send the business card in or through the sergeant saying, "I'm here, I'd like to speak with you for a couple of minutes about an issue." I just think that's so valuable. And I think it's also valuable to folks to come down and see what the landscape looks like. See the 23 oil and gas lobbyists that are lobbying against my bill, and see what we're up against, and see what works. Folks come down to testify, which is really, really appreciated, by the way. But sometimes, well, if they haven't been down before, they're coming into a foreign situation. They haven't been there before. They don't know what's most effective. Lobbyists and others have been down there many, many times. They know how to put something into 2 minutes or less to get people's attention. And I just think there's things that you can learn by being down there and being more effective to hear your voice, or have your voice heard, I should say. So please, I would encourage it. And if you are in my district, please also let me know that you're there, and I'd love to speak with you further.
Okay, thank you. Representative Singer.
Thanks again for having me. I really, really appreciate the opportunity and the really thoughtful questions that were asked. I think one of the bills that I want to highlight is actually a bill of mine that I killed myself, and we'll start on that up note. But I don't know if our district attorney Stan Garnett is still here. I think he popped his head in. He and I have been working on a bill on wage theft for a couple years now. This is stopping unethical employers from non-payment of wages owed. So if your employer says, "I'll pay you $1,000 a month," and at the end of the job they say, "Well, I meant 200, or I meant 300, or I meant 0." It happens. About 40 to 60% of low-wage income earners will have their wages stolen from them at some point in their career. These are folks that are hand-to-mouth, paycheck to paycheck. This makes the difference between keeping a roof over your head and going to a homeless shelter for some people. And so I encourage folks out there, regardless of your issue, just because your issue doesn't get past 1 year, don't give up. Keep pressing, keep trying. We saw this with asset. We saw this with civil unions. We'll probably see this with oil and gas in some respects. But the good news is that there is a next year, and so stay involved. And if you've got questions about how things actually happen at the Capitol, and you've got the time to come down, either myself or one of my interns would be happy to walk you through the process, because you're the people that make it real. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Senator Jones.
I'd also like to thank everybody for the opportunity to be here today and to talk about the session. I think it's really important for us to communicate both directions, listen to people, but let people know what's going on. This is really helpful in that way. My focus is going to be surviving the next month. And
some
it
long
gets
nights, I
like
think.
that. I joke about it, but it's intense already and gets even more intense. And I've never seen so many big chunks of things moving at one time in the state legislature. I want to bring my climate smart renewable jobs bill to the finish line. It was killed 2 years ago. It's kind of a quest of mine. And the electric vehicle stuff as well, trying to promote those. The schools is not going to be done at the end of the session. I think we're going to do a setup so people can have a choice at the ballot box next November. And that's going to be very important to the future of the state, I think. And then working on the oil and gas issues so that we have accountability and responsibility in that industry. I think we have a long ways to go, but through a team effort, we're making that happen. And I just want to finish with, again, saying I appreciate the opportunity to serve again, having served in the late 80s, early 90s, and then coming back. It's quite an opportunity, and I appreciate it very much. And if anybody wants to get a hold of me, my email, senatormattjones@email.com, and I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Representative Hollinghorst.
Thank you. Well, we will sine die on May 8th.
Yes.
By midnight, I hope. Otherwise, it's all over anyway, as you remember from, unfortunately, a year or so ago.
Yes.
So I have heard from many people in the lobby and others who have watched the legislative process for many years, and including myself, that they have never seen so much work get done in a legislative session. And we have a lot more to do in the next 4 weeks, almost 4 weeks. I'm excited about that. I think we did what our constituents said they wanted us to do. They don't like gridlock. They wanted us to work across the aisle. We have done that, I believe, very well. I would want to thank the Vice Chair of the Joint Budget Committee, my dear friend and colleague, Claire Levy, for the work that was done on the long bill and the budget bill this year. It is a good document, and it is a bipartisan document, and it provides, it represents the values of our communities and our state. It was a very big accomplishment. We have a lot more to do, as you've heard today, but I look forward to it, even though it's going to be exhausting. It's also very exciting to be able to do the work of the people, and it's a great honor and a privilege to serve. And please contact me anytime my number is published, and please get in touch.
Representative Levy.
Thank you. And before I launch into my closing, I want to just reiterate what Representative Foote said at the beginning, which is how strong your Boulder County delegation is. We have the majority leader here sitting with us. I'm vice chair of the Joint Budget Committee this year, and I'll be chair next year, and I chair the Appropriations Committee. You've got Senator Heath that you chair 2 committees in the one committee in the Senate, but nothing gets done in the Senate without both Senator Jones and Senator Heath. You're well represented. We have a lot of work still to do. While we passed a budget, I guess the thought I want to leave you with is that we should not let the fact that our revenues are climbing and we're no longer cutting distract us from the fact that because of Tabor, we are falling farther and farther behind all the time. Our population is growing, but we are not too far above, with an additional 700,000 people in this state. We're not too far above where we were 12 years ago in terms of our revenue, and that's unsustainable. We are going to expand Medicaid to the full extent allowed under the Affordable Care Act. That will not cost us any more money for that increment of population, but the growth in our student population and the growth in the Medicaid case loan alone could consume the entire budget, leaving nothing for higher education. So I hope that you, the League, will help us work on reforming our revenue situation.
Okay. Yeah, that we definitely will. Senator Heath.
Thank you so much, and it is a privilege to serve, and to serve this county is, you can't believe what it means for all of us. And this is a great team up here. I'm sure you would agree with me. I'm so proud to serve with each and every one of them. We did not talk about constitutional issues at all, and we really didn't get into our economic development issues. Dickie and I are doing an enterprise zone bill together, which we hope is going to free up some money for some of the key industries in this county around bioscience and all of the renewable energy companies that we have here. So some real opportunities there that we didn't get to talk about. Let me also tell you, we're doing hopefully passing a School Finance Act and an initiative this year. Next year, the plan is to take a look at the Constitution. And I had introduced something called a Constitutional Revision Commission in the Senate a couple of years ago. It didn't get out of the Senate. I shouldn't say that. It got out of the Senate, but didn't get anywhere in the House. We're going to look at that on a statewide basis. And the idea is to find a mechanism to deal with Tabor Gallagher and Amendment 23 and see if we can break what we all know as the Gordian knot. That has to be done because all of us are unable to deal with the budget in any real sense. As you've heard, once you make a decision to cut something, you can never put it back in without a vote of the people, and it just doesn't work. So when we're here a year from now, hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that because we have to deal with the constitutional issues facing the state.
Okay, thank you all. I want to thank our audience and the questions, and also the committee, but also thank all of our representatives and senators. You do a fantastic job in representing us, and thank you all for coming.
We'll see you soon.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get to.